Welcome to Triathlon 101. I'm Coach Scott Beasley, giving a Cliff Note version of a presentation originally given to the Souls Inspired Tri Club. Today we're going to talk about what scares you most about race day and the things that we're going to do today to prepare you. So beyond swimming, biking, and running, there's a lot of things that we triathletes face. Congested time in the water, a crazy race morning, including long lines at the Porta-Johns, and of course the random flat tire. So we have seminars like this to address all those issues so that when race day comes there are no surprises. Our agenda for today is we're going to discuss first the philosophical underpinning that drives everything that I do as an athlete and coach based on my experience. We're going to talk some basic exercise physiology to lay the groundwork, which will include a little bit of heart rate based training concepts. We'll address safety issues, gear, how we swim here in Western Nevada County, as well as nutrition. Philosophical underpinning. I believe there are three keys to success as an endurance athlete. One is to live in a supportive environment. This includes home, work, and of course being with the Tri Club. Throughout the season we'll talk about ways that you can better include the family. Second key to long-term success is having freak genetics. Bad news here is you have it or you don't. Maybe you were born with genetics like Lance, maybe not, but one thing I've learned is I'm not the kind of coach that can change that. Third, and arguably the most important thing here, is that you need to train year-round, year after year. So the phrase that there is no off-season is more than just a cliched phrase used by shoe commercials and sports drink manufacturers. The fastest athlete is a healthy, uninjured athlete. This means that we got to take care of your body, not just to making it faster and having it go further, but also making sure that you don't have those aches and pains that knock so many athletes out of commission. And then the second thing is that we have to make this fun. So throughout this season, you'll find that we have a good mix of sound exercise based on evidence and science, but we also do some things to shake it up and make it fun as well, because if you're not enjoying this, you're not going to keep coming to practice. So expect some of that in the time ahead. Basic exercise physiology. So what actually happens when we exercise? Well, we know our muscles contract because that's what allows for the forward movement. When these contracting muscles get moving, they need more fuel to fire. So the heart beats faster to keep up with the increased fuel delivery requirements. And then once we're good and warmed up, those blood vessels get a little bit wider and open up in a process called vasodilation to allow the blood to flow a little bit easier. And when that happens, our blood pressure actually gets lower. And then over time, of course, the body, to continue this process, needs either fat or sugar to provide that fuel. And whether we're going fast or slow depends on whether it's fat or sugar. So that's short term. In the long term, at a cellular level, the powerhouse portion of your cells get bigger. So this is something that happens over the course of a whole season. We get greater what's called mitochondrial density. At the muscular level, they become more resistant to fatigue. So that's where the frequency of exercise comes into play. At a systemic level, your body increases its possible cardiac output and has greater output at any given distance. So in dork speak, what we're really saying here is that your VO2 max gets larger, and then your aerobic threshold grows as well to take advantage of that higher output, your VO2 max. All right, let's talk about heart rate training. As a group, our go-to methodology for tracking our effort will be our heart rate. While there's certainly limitations, it is definitely one of the most efficient for us age group athletes. So heart rate based exercise is the most consistent method of training in race pacing. It can be thrown off by things like caffeine, where you're at in your cycle, and adrenaline come race day, but it is still way more consistent relative to other methods of training such as those based on pace or power, because if we just pick a given pace and try to maintain a specific pace, that can be tricky because of hills, heat, wind, humidity, and clothing. So obviously, let's say that your go all day pace is an 8-minute mile when you're jogging. You might be able to hold that on the flats, but when you come to that steep hill where you're climbing up at a 6% grade, obviously that becomes much trickier and could be the beginning of the end of your race day performance as the energy gets sucked out of you climbing that hill, stubbornly holding on to that pace. So that's why we use heart rate based training. If we stick to a given heart rate, we know that when that hill comes, our heart rate will go up if we maintain that same pace. So actually slow down on that hill climb and then the descent down the backside. So that's when it comes to race pace training or race pace based on heart rate. When it comes to training, using the heart rate is a valuable tool because it allows us to work on specific energy delivery systems. A little beyond the scope of today's conversation, but we'll definitely spend some time talking about that in the future. And in a perfect world, all of you would have heart rate monitors that could be used throughout practice and in our races this year. The reality is that might not happen, and that's okay because when we talk about heart rate based training, we can gauge our own heart rate based on what's going on in our body and the physiological response. So as long as you understand these different heart rate zones and what's going on in your body, you don't actually need the heart rate monitor. A little less accurate, but nonetheless, you can just use these signs to know where you're at. So again, zone 1 with recovery and warm-up, totally conversational and easy. I like to say that if you can go out on a zone 1 exercise session, you don't even need to shower afterwards. Zone 2 is still your go all day pace and totally conversational, but now it's starting to feel like work. Zone 3 means your ability to speak is getting compromised a little bit. Zone 4, you can only speak a couple of words, perhaps few syllables max. And then Zone 5 is where breathing eventually becomes audible. Zone 4 is where we age group athletes, meaning not elite, not professionals, perhaps not the most genetically gifted bunch. That's where we get the most bang for our buck in terms of getting faster. Now, you have to have a base before you can go grind those Zone 4 sessions, and we'll talk about what it means to have a base in a moment here. But the Zone 4 is where we get it done. More elite athletes, competitive age groupers, it's actually that anaerobic work, that supra threshold work that helps build speed in the most efficient manner and make you fast. And when it comes to performance, here's my theory of performance. There are times when I'll give you facts and hard science and times when I'll give you some more of the art of training. This is definitely more the art of training. It's been my experience that the most important place to start in working with the body is with stability and mobility. This is why I'm such a huge fan of strength training in yoga. Unfortunately, as we're into the season already as a club, we aren't able to spend a lot of time here, but come around next year, those of you that stick around, this is what we'll be talking about a lot in September, October, November. Where we're going to start for those of you beginners or those of you making a little comeback here is with the aerobic base. This is just steady effort exercise, not speed training, nothing crazy. We're just, again, building our aerobic base. From there, we focus on speed and getting faster. Once we get faster, we then apply that to longer distances and build endurance. And once we've built that endurance, as race day gets closer, we do some very specific, race-specific exercises to get you keyed up and ready to go and have that body respond. So you'll notice that I put speed before endurance. So my belief as a coach, and it does differ from some that are out there, in full and fair disclosure, my belief is that once you have that aerobic base, you need to focus on speed. You don't go long and then try to get faster at longer distances. You get faster and apply those speeds to longer distances. A couple reasons for this. One is that if you look at the cause of injury in most athletes, it typically comes from overuse injuries and specifically long distance, high volume training plans. So I try to avoid those in general. Obviously, we have to put in the time for those of you doing longer distance races this year, but try to avoid the long distance stuff as much as possible. And then the second reason we do speed before building endurance is simply because it works. When you look at people mopping up in the longer course racing today, a lot of them come from an ITU background, meaning people whose races were over in anywhere from an hour 48 to 1 hour. Those are the people who kind of spent their formative years getting quicker at those distances, who then applied that speed to longer distances and are now getting it done at the 70.3 and 140.6 distance. Most notable example recently is Andy Potts, who went from a sport-specific athlete in swimming to crossing over to international distance ITU triathlons, and then his sense at the half iron distance just cleaned up, and I believe now close to 20 wins. That said, that previous side is assuming that many of you have a speed goal. You want to get faster, you want to improve, and you have the base built. And that's super important. In the absence of having that aerobic base built, of again training year round, year after year for the last year or so, that's where we start. So whether you're coming off the couch or just kind of focusing on multi-sport for the first time, perhaps crossing over from running, we need to build that aerobic base in all three sports. So for those of you following our base training program as opposed to the performance track, what we're going to do is this right here. We're going to work on your aerobic base for much of the season. Once that base is built through frequency of training, again, can't stress it enough, more important that you get out often as opposed to go long. Once you're used to getting in 2-3 runs, 2-3 bikes a week at shorter distances, only then do we build endurance. Then we'll maybe at the end of the year have a very short race-specific period of training. And regardless of what any expert or coach tells you, so if something doesn't feel good, regardless of what a coach or expert tells you, you gotta listen to your own body and back away. Here's a great example. So this is an email that came in from a private client. This is now a couple years old. But in the email, you can see the highlighted area that client says that my legs were tired and sore. These are two guys I can usually hang with, and some comments about how his heart rate was a little erratic. So this is an experienced athlete who should have been able to head out and take down that 42-mile ride with no issues, but very keenly picked up on some things that were going on with the body. So fatigue, legs were tired and sore. Again, two guys you can normally hang with, so I'm kind of falling behind relative to your peers who you can normally work out with. So these are all signs of a body that needs a break and perhaps some overtraining. And this is really important that you guys pick up on this in your own bodies, because as a group, we do not have quote recovery weeks as a club. I don't believe in that add 10% every week philosophy. There's some sound reasons behind it, but when training in a group, it doesn't necessarily always work out that way. My guess is that many of you have commitments away from this sport, so far be it for me to schedule a recovery week. My guess is that your own life will tear you away from practice. So instead, we will maintain from week to week, each of these bars represents a week of training. From week to week, we will maintain a steady training load for a couple weeks in a row and then bump it up more than 10%. So if you need a break, it's up to you to listen to your body, respect your body, and take that break. And if anything's out of the norm, by all means, bring it to my attention, and I'll steer you to the right people to check you out. So let's talk more about safety. Many of these sport-specific items will be dealt with individually at different practices, but in terms of swimming, always swim with a buddy, especially in open water. Check in on the beach, check in throughout the swim, check in frequently. Wear a neon cap so that we can keep track of you from shore. We're not trying to find a white cap against some waves that are breaking offshore. Arms overhead in the water are for rescue and rescue only. Don't wave to your buddy. Communicate verbally. Because if your arm's over your head, that means I'm charging in from the shore full Hasselhoff, and you owe me a new iPhone. On the bike, helmet used correctly, which means nice and snug. Uh, Tires should be inflated daily. The old press the thumb down doesn't actually work. Wear a bright jersey and keep your rear light on even when you're riding during the day. Be sure to wear glasses. Know that running shoes are for running only. You can track mileage using lots of different apps such as Strava.com, where our club actually has a page. And then the final thing, I would encourage everyone to not wear earphones ever during your training. It takes away from your ability to have that great mind-body connection. But if you perceive that you have to wear them, never on the bike outdoors. And if you're doing it during running, please, I'm going to ask that you keep it in the right ear only so that you can hear traffic and those of us on the left yelling at you as we go by. One of the most important subtopics of safety here, besides gear within Western Nevada County, especially in the summer, is the topic of hydration. So forget every rule you've ever heard about how much water you should drink. Everyone needs to know their own specific sweat rate. It could be as simple as just looking at the color of your urine. I know it's kind of gross, but there's a martial arts coach who used to tell his students, never come to my class unless you're peeing clear. And that's a good rule. For those of you who want to get a little bit more technical, you can weigh in before and after practices and just see what your body weight loss is and attributed only in water. 1% is okay. Anything more than that, we want to be careful with, especially knowing that we lose more on race day than we will on any training day that we have. In terms of, quote, electrolytes, kind of something the commercials and media have made a little bit too convoluted for us. Know that salt is the most important electrolyte. All the other fancy stuff are helpful and healthy, but salt is what you need to keep those cells nice and full of water, nice thick blood plasma, and help prevent cramps. All right, race-specific items for us. First A race of the season for this club will be the Folsom Triathlon Series. We have a sprint option, an international option, and a half iron. So the water temps at Nimbus Flat are one of the few race-specific details that you need to know. Assuming we get some rain and can swim and it's not a nice muddy crawl, you can expect water temps to be pretty darn cold in the low 60s. This means it's strongly encouraged that you use a wetsuit. Whether you rent it just for race week or buy it is totally up to you, but it will definitely make your race more enjoyable if you have one. Bike and run courses are uneventful, pretty flat. But the air temperature itself will be pretty variable, starting your race day in the 50s and peaking in the 80s likely towards the end of the day. But nothing we don't deal with every single day here in the summertime in Nevada City and Grass Valley. Swimming in Nevada County, always a challenge, right? Not a lot of pools, at least those that are made available. So we're going to unofficially partner with Northern Sierra Aquatics Masters Swim and Coach Trey down there in Grass Valley at Memorial Park Pool. So lots of options for you. The key is do not wait. I know the typical plan around here is to wait until May or June when we can get into open water, but I'm telling you, you will be behind the program if you wait until May. You will be impacting not just your performance, but your overall experience in the race. So please show up to Masters Swim and join Coach Troy. Take a look at those courtesy rules. If you're new to Masters Swim, there's some etiquette things that you need to know in terms of how to interact with other people there in the pool so that they don't throw you out or get mad. Gear. My least favorite topic as a coach. You need to know that I completed my first century ride on a bike that was purchased for $300. Went on to finish my first Ironman on that same $300 bike. Prior to that, finished my first ever triathlon on a bike that was acquired in a barter for a punching bag. So know that it is my belief that you need gear for the fact of safety that we spoke about earlier. Comfort should be second, so maybe your second most expensive purchase this year might be a new bike seat or a nice pair of tri-shorts. But beyond that, gear does not make the athlete. Training makes the athlete. Gear only really matters at the very top end of performance. That's me there. I do have $3,000 invested in the aerodynamics of my bike, but I also have had it come down to a matter of seconds in different races. At National Championship last year, it came down to 29 seconds for me making the Worlds, or Team USA to compete in Worlds. But for the general athlete, gear is not incredibly important. Nutrition. It's really important as athletes that we understand the difference between eating for the sake of performance as opposed to recovery, and what we would do in terms of healthy nutrition for day-to-day life and weight loss, and how those things interact. In terms of performance, we need to fuel the machine of your body, so that we can get the most out of our practices. Now, this is a completely different philosophy compared to the other end of the spectrum of how we would eat to lose weight. So if your plan is to use triathlon as a mode for weight loss, do that now, because as practices get longer and the season progresses and we get closer to race day, you're going to need to be taking in calories so that you can perform. Be sure to have a strategy for your increased appetite, because as that volume of training increases, so will your level of hunger. For practice, know that water and sodium need to be your friends and the most important things that you can do. Avoiding fat and fiber helps as well in the time before practice, being the morning of and arguably the night before. During practice, you really don't need to be knocking down calories until practices get a little bit longer, but water is super important. And then make sure you have something with you so that you can begin eating and then rehydrating immediately after practice. Race day strategy, again, nothing new. Use every practice as one big experiment, dialing things in. Like other topics, this is just a brief overview. Then we will have a full hour presentation specific to nutrition later this year. So we covered a lot of different topics at a very superficial level today. Know that this is just the beginning, trying to get some different topics out there in front of you to just think a little bit differently about how you approach the sport and how you manage your body. Overall, just to take a step back and look big picture, know that the most successful athletes are those who are the most consistent. Again, beginners need to focus on the frequency of training to build that aerobic base. Advanced athletes need to focus on speed, since they already have that base built, and then endurance down the road. So focus on the right training path for you. Know that you don't have to do everything all the time. Simply make some small changes in your programming, doing kind of the next best thing in line for what will help you grow. And of course, listen to your body and your coach. Again, I'm Scott Beasley. Thanks for tuning in. Those of you just following along on the web know that I can be reached at coachbees@soulsinspired.com if you have any questions. And those of you on the team, we will see you at practice.